Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ed Lambert. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education. On behalf of our members and affiliates, I want to welcome you to today's important conversation. For those of you unfamiliar with us or our work, we're a nonprofit public policy advocacy organization representing the state's business voices in support of high-quality public educational experiences for all students. And for those who have interacted with us, you know how focused we are on bringing evidence-based practices to the forefront where they can be seen, shared, launched, and expanded in ways that address pressing educational challenges and advance opportunities for students. Today, you're going to learn about an incredibly promising model of early literacy tutoring that is producing significant and positive results for first graders with reading gaps, which, if left unaddressed, could affect their entire academic career and their future success. We'll discuss the challenge as it exists in Massachusetts schools, the contours of this new and emerging model, and recent research completed by Johns Hopkins University that show the accelerated student outcomes the model is producing. We'll hear from a panel of practitioners about their experiences with this intervention and close with some final comments and reflections from our state's interim commissioner of education, Russell Johnston. I also want to thank the 1-8 Foundation for their proof of concept funding that has helped launch this virtual high-dosage tutoring model, which is currently in place due to their philanthropy in 13 school districts and 49 schools across the state, serving approximately 2,500 students. Before I introduce the researchers from Johns Hopkins to present their data, allow me to provide some context for today's discussion. It has become increasingly clear as we look at the student literacy data that we as a Commonwealth must act urgently to get our youngest students back on the path to literacy success. The trends have not been encouraging, notwithstanding impacts from the pandemic. Both NAEP and MCAS scores show literacy proficiency rates stagnating and indeed declining. And this, combined with the Boston Globe's excellent series highlighting that less than half of our third graders are reading on grade level, should serve as a call to action. Embracing data that show us what works and supporting innovation in pursuit of better outcomes should be our charge. High quality, high dosage tutoring is producing some early positive results here in Massachusetts in student learning recovery and closing literacy gaps. The science of reading research, and specifically Nancy Young's ladder of reading, tells us that upwards of 60% of kids must be taught with code-based, explicit, systematic instruction or they will not learn to read. As the Boston Globe series also laid out, only 1/2 of our state school districts are using a science-based literacy curriculum, with the other half using a curricula deemed by the state as low quality. That means that large numbers of students in those districts don't even have a fighting chance to reach literacy proficiency, despite the best efforts of educators. This is why MBAE and others are advocating for Massachusetts to join 34 other states who have already required a high-quality literacy curriculum in all of their schools. In fact, this high-dosage tutoring model we're presenting today can only be implemented effectively in tandem with a science-based literacy curriculum. I also want to point out, though, that even with a high-quality curriculum and great teachers implementing it, at least half of that 60% of students will need more to achieve success. They're going to need a level of frequent repetition that a classroom teacher simply can't provide, but that this tutoring model can. Why is that? Well, because learning to read isn't a natural process our brains are wired to do. And the latter shows that about 60% of kids need lots of at-bats with orthographic mapping to solidify the code and become automatic readers. This matters because automaticity frees the brain's working memory up for the rich work of comprehension. And we know from the recent Curriculum Associates study that 83% of first graders who end the year on benchmark for phonics will be on benchmark for all reading skills in third grade when they have to demonstrate on a high-stakes test that they can comprehend. Ignite is one of the vendors doing this work to great effect. There are other vendors providing this virtual service as well, but today's research features data from Ignite's work. Each first grade student identified as in need spends 15 minutes at the same time each day, at the same time with other students in their class, and with the same individual tutor for the entire school year on a personalized pace to proficiency. Tutors are remote, they undergo significant training, and they each establish a relationship with their students that, combined with a consistent phonics-based approach inspire success and confidence in their young charges. The data on progress with each student is shared with each school and teacher and truly supplements the classroom instruction that gives students what they need to succeed. In addition to the data about to be shared with you, I have to say that observationally, the enthusiasm, joy, and the engagement of students seen when visiting these classrooms, along with the testimonials of teachers who are highly supportive based on the progress they see their students making, speaks to the strength of this model in important ways. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Amanda Neitzel, an assistant research scientist at the Center for Research and Reform in Education at the Johns Hopkins School of Education, and Dr. Joseph Riley, who is also an assistant research associate at the center. Amanda and Joe are going to share takeaways from the quantitative and qualitative research they recently completed on high-dosage literacy tutoring in Massachusetts. Amanda and Joe, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ed, for that introduction, and I echo those sentiments as well with regard to thanking everyone for being here today to sort of, again, discuss what we found in this exciting tutoring initiative that we looked at across the state of Massachusetts. But then also, I think for us as well to sort of key it up for the panelists that we have later on too. So Amanda and I have a brief presentation today to just sort of go over the high-level findings of what we found in our research across Massachusetts on Ignite. So to provide a quick overview as to what our study did and how we conducted our methodologies, our primary goal was to evaluate the impact of Ignite reading on early literacy outcomes, specifically looking at the DIBELS assessment. So sort of seeing how students began the year and then closed the year after receiving instruction through Ignite, and then comparing those outcomes not only to national norms on the DIBELS assessment, but then also comparing those growth curves against those of other students in these districts who did not receive instruction through Ignite. In addition to that, we also tried to gather as much information from stakeholders as we could. We administered a comprehensive end-of-year survey to all the first grade teachers across the 13 districts whose students were using Ignite to get their feedback. We interviewed about 30 or so teachers as well, to get additional nuanced feedback concerning how the tutoring initiative operated in their classrooms, and then also interviewed school principals, we interviewed district leaders, we interviewed others who also involved in the initiative as well, to sort of gather their feedback on everything that kind of went into this initiative over the course of the past year. In terms of our sample, in terms of the number of children that were involved in this, we had students from across 13 school districts and 46 schools, just under 2,000 students overall. Again, we had over 150 first grade teachers complete surveys, and then also had a substantial number of interviews that we did across stakeholder groups from the district level to the school level to the classroom level as well. And Amanda.
Thank you, Joe. So I'm excited to share the findings from the quantitative portion of this research study. So we looked at outcomes two different ways. One is an analysis that looks at all 13 of those districts and compares how much students grew to how much we would have expected them to grow according to how the assessment was designed nationally. And then in the second analysis, we took a deep dive in 4 districts who gave the DIBELS universally across the district so that we could compare results for students who participated in tutoring with similar sets of students who did not participate in tutoring. So first, I'm going to talk about that one group pre-post design, which you can see on the screen here. So this is pretty simple. At the beginning of the year, students performing below grade level were identified for tutoring. They took the DIBELS at the beginning of the year. They participated in virtual tutoring all year, and at the end of the year completed that DIBELS test again. And so we're going to compare their growth to what we would have expected on that test. So we also accounted for key factors such as pretest scores, race, ethnicity, English learner status, and special education status. Okay, next slide, Joe. And here we can see in that one group pre-post analysis across all districts, we found significant improvements on the DIBELS, more than what we would normally expect within a year. So on average, students gained over 5 additional months of learning. So what's particularly striking is that these gains were consistent across demographic subgroups, including English learners. students receiving special education services, and students of different racial and ethnic backgrounds. So that consistency underscores the program's ability to deliver meaningful literacy support to a diverse range of learners. Next slide, Joe. Okay, attendance emerged as a critical factor in this study. So students who were attending at rates above 85% showed significantly larger literacy gains compared with those with lower attendance rates. That really highlights the importance of consistent participation in achieving to reach optimal results. So on average, students with the highest attendance close literacy gaps more effectively, reinforcing the value of integrating this structured high dosage tutoring into students' daily routines. Okay, so next slide, Joe. And you can see first, what is especially remarkable is that overall attendance rate of 89%. So on the last slide, we saw 85% was a very important marker to reach for the strongest impacts. And here we can see that most kids actually did reach that. So implementation quality was quite high. And then this slide also highlights the substantial progress students made in closing literacy gaps over the school year. So for example, at the beginning of the year, most students were classified as requiring intensive intervention. That red section, which was far below benchmark. A smaller percentage fell into the below benchmark or strategic intervention category. By the end of the year, we saw a significant shift. The proportion of students meeting benchmark standards increased dramatically, with the green section growing from 16% to 50%. At the same time, the red section, those students who required intensive intervention dropped from 64% to just 28%. So that means 29% of students transitioned from requiring intensive intervention to achieving benchmark standards, which really illustrates the effectiveness in closing literacy gaps. Next slide, Joe. We're racing through this quickly, I know. So this really illustrates the design for that two-group quasi-experimental design, which is a little more rigorous, but was only happened in 4 school districts. So the same way, students performed below grade level. They took the Dibbles test. Some students participated in the Ignite Reading virtual tutoring. Some did not. They took the end of the year Dibbles test. And then we used a process called propensity score matching to match students who participated in tutoring with similar students who didn't participate in tutoring, and then compared the growth of the tutored students with the growth of the non-tutored students. So next slide, Joe. So even in this more rigorous analysis, we found that the Ignite Reading tutoring students achieved significantly higher literacy gains than their peers who did not receive tutoring, with an effect size of 0.21 standard deviations. Those impacts were particularly meaningful for Black students and English learners, with effect sizes of 0.24 standard deviations and 0.31 standard deviations, respectively. So those really align with the goal of helping close persistent literacy gaps. And now I will turn it back over to Joe to talk about our qualitative findings and sum this up.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, in the context of those impacts, we also, again, as I alluded to at the start of this presentation, really try to gather as much information as we could from stakeholders from the district level all the way down to the classroom level as well, to really understand how this tutoring initiative played out over the course of the past year. And I'll sort of just kind of key up our high-level findings that we discuss all in detail through the report, but there are really a handful that really stand out here. I think that the first is that across stakeholder groups, there's really this strong sense of the instructional value of one-to-one tutoring. So this dedicated 15 minutes that is being provided, not just to a few students in each school, but to so many kids across these schools, is something that's really highlighted as something that's very valuable. It's also very difficult to replicate otherwise in public school environments. Teachers in classrooms, principals, district leaders, everybody sort of talked through a variety of different impacts that they're seeing kind of firsthand with regard to the impact of this tutoring. One thing that comes up over and over again is really sort of the unique importance of this type of intervention for students at this kind of basic alphabetic knowledge cluster. So those who are really kind of starting first grade with having, for the most part, sort of the lowest early literacy skills are really benefiting the most from this type of intervention too. We also talk about in our report other impacts that are highlighted with regard to kind of the ways that this one-to-one tutoring and the relationships that are fostered between tutors and the students are really kind of helping foster students' social emotional well-being and the important role that plays. We talk in detail in the report as well about the different strategies as to how this was integrated as part of a multi-tiered system of support in these schools. So how this was really fit into this RTI or MTSS tier 2 across first grade, and how it works with other programs as well. So in terms of talking through strategies and things like that that were identified by classroom teachers, by literacy specialists, and also by again, school principals and district leaders with regard to how this tutoring initiative worked over the course of the past year and what made it effective. We highlight a lot of different strategies in our report as well, talking about the importance of school champions having kind of veteran teachers who can help lead the initiative and serve as advocates for it across the school, leveraging classroom teachers' expertise across all the little nuances with this, and then also talking through as well different strategies that can be used for navigating technology use with young students. Obviously, these are first graders. Yes, they're digital natives, but at the same time, this is virtual tutoring, so there are aspects of kind of enhancing their ability to engage with tutors through computers and things like that we discuss. And then I'll close with just sort of talking through quickly a couple of quotes that I think sort of sum up what we're seeing and what we're hearing from stakeholders on this initiative. The first one really speaks to the idea that there's a very strong consensus of wanting to continue this type of intervention, this one-to-one tutoring in future years. That's something we see again from the district level, from the school level, from the classroom level. We see that across stakeholders. And then the second one deals with this idea that it's 15 minutes. So sort of the instructional efficiency of this type of thing, where this is not an intervention that, again, is going to necessitate an additional hour's worth of planning time on behalf of teachers in the evening. It's not something that takes up half of the ELA block in the day. It's not something that pushes out other important instructional features of the school day. It really works in tandem with other things. So it's this significant value add as well. So with that said, talking through broader impacts and implications, I think we'll probably use this time here to kick it back to Ed and tee it up for our panel.
Thank you both very much, Man and Joe. We appreciate that. And we also appreciate the fact that we know that you're working to answer a couple of the questions that are relevant to your research in the Q&A. And so we very much appreciate that as well. What I'll do now is turn it over to the panel. And in particular, it's with great pleasure, I introduce Mandy McLaren. Mandy's a reporter with the Boston Globe. It is in large part her writing and reporting over the last 18 months, which has really helped provide the context and the framework for these important policy discussions statewide. And we're very, very pleased that Mandy is joining us today to moderate our panel. And I'm going to leave it to her to introduce the members of the panel and take it from there. Mandy?
All right, thanks, Ed. I'm so happy to be here today, and I hope that give me a thumbs up if we're all set up and you're seeing my face. We're good. Okay. I'm very excited to be here today to participate in this. I love talking about literacy. I will say that I'm coming to you live from the Boston Globe newsroom, so all bets are off about what happens around me as we're having our chat, but I'll do my best to stay muted. But I want to introduce our really fabulous panelists today. We have people who are in the trenches working with students and experiencing this high dosage tutoring model firsthand, which I think is what we're all here to learn about. So first, I want to introduce Diane Kelly, who is the superintendent for Revere Public Schools. We have Stephanie Perazzo, who is the literacy coach for Revere Public Schools. We have Katie Schumel, the K-4 Literacy and Humanities Coordinator for Chelsea Public Schools, and Carrie Anderson, a first grade educator for Chelsea Public Schools. And I just want to remind folks, you've already been doing a great job at putting questions in the chat, and just go ahead and continue doing that. And we'll do our best to answer as many of those as we can. But I'm going to kick it off with a question for Diane. And I previously was a reading tutor that went into an elementary school and did a program. And so I think a lot of us are familiar with sort of that drop by tutoring aspect where everybody is well-intentioned, but maybe the impact is not always there. So I'm curious, what makes this specific high dosage tutoring program different than other tutoring approaches that Revere may have tried in the past? And in particular, how are we seeing groups of students like multilingual learners respond to this intervention?
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the panel. I think one of the main differences with Ignite that's been a big game changer for teachers is the fact that the one-on-one individual tutoring is happening in the classroom. So most of our previous tutoring models, many of our other models that we currently still use, require students to be pulled out of the classroom. And that means when they're meeting with an interventionist in a small group or in a room by themselves, they're missing whatever it is the teacher is sharing with the rest of the class. The way this works, at least in Revere, is the kids stay in the classroom, they participate in the lesson, and when we break out to do our different literacy circles, our small groups, one of them is Ignite. And so a group of kids will go over and put on their headphones and log into the computer and talk to their tutor for 15 minutes and practice their reading that way, while the teacher is at another station doing something different with other kids who have slightly different needs. And it becomes part of the routine and part of the rotation. So the kids are not made to feel different or othered because they're participating, but they're also not missing any of the teacher's instruction. And I think that is huge, both for the kids and for the teachers who in other systems and programs often felt like, now I have to catch this kid up because you just missed another 15 minutes of literacy, right? So this can be styled differently. And the fact that they have the same tutor every day, so each kid has a tutor assigned, and when they do their 15 minutes every day, it's the same person. So they're building a relationship. They're able to continue whatever gains were made the day before, instead of using part of that time for the tutor to understand where the child is at this point in time and then move them from there. They have that knowledge, so they're able to progress kids a lot more quickly. Revere, as you know, is a very diverse community. 34% of our kids are English learners. 72% of them come from homes where English is not the primary language spoken. And 80% of our kids are identified as high needs. So they're either living in poverty, or they have special education needs, or they're English learners. So we have a lot of need in Revere. And what we've seen from this program is that it can really be individualized to the student needs, and that has closed our gaps tremendously. When we did the pilot last year, 23-24, as you know, expected growth over the course of a school year is 9 months. Our kids are an average of 15.2 months who participate in this program. So they actually gained a year, almost a year and 2/3, really. And so that's huge. We're really seeing a difference in how they're doing. And yeah, I think I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. And I think, one thing to point out is that this is not a silver bullet solution, right? That it
Right.
is part of a larger effort in Revere and in other districts as well to really take a critical look at how we are approaching literacy with our students. And so I'll pivot to Stephanie and ask, um, you know, how does the high dosage tutoring model complement the other efforts that Revere has undertaken in recent years to really hit the ground running with your kids when it comes to learning to read?
Thank you, Mandy. So I like to think of our school as a literacy ecosystem. And when we're talking about that, there are many different pieces that go into that. So we have our reading specialists who are providing that tier 2 specialized instructions. We have high quality classroom teachers who are giving students their tier 1 grade level curriculum instruction, and then also pulling those students in a small group and delivering that tier 2 instruction. What we've been missing is that authentic, true tier 3 that we talk about in MTSS and we're looking for in that one-on-one setting. And Ignite for us has filled that gap in our tier 3 instruction and allowed us to have these multiple layers of support for students where they're getting literacy instruction individualized for them on so many levels while still being exposed to grade level curriculum from their teachers. Ignite has also helped us and been part of this team to understand the child as more of a whole. So there's more adult direct instruction time for our students now. When you think about a classroom, you've heard so many times, I wish I had 15 teachers in here, one for every kid. And now when we're allowing our students to go off and to work in these small group instruction centers, as Diane mentioned, we now are taking that independence and allowing students to have more direct instruction instead. And we all know, especially with first graders, the level of independence needed to complete work without an adult is sometimes not there for some of our struggling learners. And in the past, some of those independent work centers have been lost learning time in those 15 minutes because students aren't quite ready to practice yet. And this has allowed those students to continue to get that direct quality instruction. Ignite also helps us to have deeper conversations about students, and it helps us to support our families as well. So having another adult who's part of this team looking at this child, with our data meetings, they tell us more specific information. So, you're hearing what the classroom teacher is seeing there. You're hearing what the reading specialist sees in there. And then you're also getting this really specific, detailed feedback about this child. And when you look at all three of those pieces together, it helps us to feel more confident that those first graders who need support are really getting all of that. And every student deserves every level and every opportunity of support that we possibly have to offer. And I think we do a really good job in Revere of doing that. And over the course of, say, kindergarten, first and second grade, we were getting those children the support that they needed. But that takes time when you only have so many adults in the classroom. And Ignite has really allowed us to accelerate that learning so that we're no longer leaving first grade not on grade level because we have all this extra assistance and boost to help our students get there.
Yeah, and I think when I went in and I saw some of this tutoring in person, it really speaks to Nancy Young's reading ladder, right? And wanting to get kids as many at-bats as possible. And I don't think you realize when, even if you're just with a small group of students, the difference in engagement level between being one of 5 students versus just being one-on-one. It's really just tremendous to watch. So thank you, Stephanie. I'm going to pivot over now to Katie with Chelsea Public Schools. And that was where I was lucky enough to go in and see some of this high dosage tutoring happening firsthand. And I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what makes this model unique. So we have the one-on-one component, we have the same tutor, so you're building sort of a relationship. And how are these things leading to the success that you're seeing with your students? What makes it so impactful?
Thanks, Mandy. So excited to be here today to be able to talk about some of the successes we've had in Chelsea Public Schools and first grade in particular with Ignite. And I do think some of the things that I'm going to touch on are connected to building upon things that Superintendent Kelly and Stephanie have already talked about. And I think the term literacy ecosystem that Stephanie used is huge. Ignite has fit so nicely into our literacy ecosystem. As a district, we have worked very hard to implement high quality instructional materials for both phonics, foundational skills, and Tier 1 ELA. We have worked very hard to build systematic structures for MTSS of collecting progress monitoring data and leveraging our reading specialists and things like that. So Ignite has fit in perfectly, and to what you were speaking about, Mandy, has given us that opportunity to provide those additional at-bats for the kids that need it. The multiple practice opportunities are something I come back to constantly, and giving feedback to reading specialists in doing observations in classrooms. The way that we make our brain ready to be a reader is with those practice opportunities. So, I think the study from JHU also spoke about the importance of attendance, and the fact that it happens during the school day is huge because that is when we know our kiddos are here. I think programming after school is in the summer is over vacations is a lot more variable and dependent on families, but when things happen during our school day, that is hugely powerful. I think it was also named that like Ignite does something that like we can't do, or high dosage tutoring in general, not necessarily just Ignite, but I could never provide services to 60 first graders at once in one building for 15 minutes. We are very fortunate. We have reading specialists. They service our striving readers. They are wonderful. Our school would not, we would not have the success we have without those individuals either. But again, it's part of the practice opportunities and at-bats for students. And I think, Mandy, you also touched on this too. I think, there is so much research out there about the effectiveness of one-on-one tutoring, even versus small group, 2-on-1, 3-on-1. You can have the most talented, exemplary reading specialist or classroom teacher who uses the most high impact instructional practices, but no two student profiles are exactly the same. And if my processing speed is slightly slower than the student sitting next to me, that student, and the teacher's using choral response, which is a great strategy. My friend next to me can start saying something and then, oh, I can just build on that. And there's not that one-on-one accountability that like my tutor is waiting just for me to give the answer. And there's no opt-out. There's no like listening for somebody else's response to repeat the same thing. So I think when thinking about kind of the specific features of the program and what makes it impactful, I think those are three big ones that we have seen. Another, kind of what you might think is a small thing is that Ignite has done a fabulous job of pairing our students with Spanish-speaking tutors and things as needed. So we do have a lot of entering and emerging Ls, and having, in some cases, it has been extremely beneficial to students to have a Spanish-speaking tutor who can clarify directions and things. Obviously, they're getting reading instruction in English, but that simple thing as clarification of directions, or a tutor who looks more like them has been kind of a added benefit that we've seen.
Yeah, and I just saw one question in the chat that I think you might be able to speak to, Katie, because you often are in classrooms observing. I know you don't have the headphones on with the kids, but you can see sort of what's happening. There's a question about sort of what does a typical Ignite lesson look like? I know when I was in there, I saw some students working on short vowels. Some students were reading passages, I think maybe for their fluency. So just briefly, could you touch on that for us?
Yeah, of course. So when students start in Ignite, they take a kind of their own benchmark assessment. They call it an IDI, which is from the curriculum that they're using. It places students within a protocol, and depending on what their protocol is, it kind of depends on what they're working on. So, but again, each lesson includes multiple practice opportunities, both kind of at the word level. If students have mastery of letter names, letter sounds, are segmenting and blending and decoding CVC words, it gets put into text. They practice high frequency words. I think kind of big picture general statement is students are practicing kind of all of what you would say are the components of a highly effective foundational skills block, right? Phonemic awareness, high frequency words, opportunities for explicit instruction with some sort of phonic skill, whether it's at the letter name, letter sound level, or it's at blends or digraphs or vowel teams or are controlled vowels. That also goes to kind of an opportunity to practice within text, which goes to some kind of, I think they call them 1-minute challenges, and opportunities for tutors to gather assessment data in order to inform levels of mastery to move forward.
And if they do a good job on an answer, they get like fireworks or confetti that explodes on their
shows up on the
screen,
screen, yeah.
which is very cute. And the kids were very highly motivated by that. So it doesn't take much with a first grader, and then we'll go over to Carrie. Thank you for your patience with us. And I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit about how your prior experiences with remote learning, with putting 6-year-olds, putting little kids on computers, affected your thoughts about going into high dosage tutoring like this, and whether or not your opinion changed over time.
Okay, I'd be happy to speak about that. Thanks for having me. Um, when we found out, our principal told us 3 years ago that in the spring that the following year we would be doing Ignite tutoring, online tutoring for 15 minutes. My coworkers and I thought it's not going to work. I was the biggest, I think, anti online tutoring person because I thought they were 6 years old. It's online. How is it going to actually help them? And how are they going to hold their attention? And luckily, I quickly found out that I was wrong. The tutors start off with really getting to know the kids, and they find out the first 2 or 3 days, I think they meet with them. They ask them questions about things they like or things they don't like. And so every day when the kids go into their session, it says welcome and the student's name, and then it has usually pictures of things they like. Last year, I had a little boy who started talking about his birthday like 3 months before it started. So on his birthday, there was fireworks and gold balloons. And so the tutors really get to know the students, and they really make it fun. They will also start off the session with quick, like, how are you feeling today? I'm ready to learn. My body is calm. They'll ask the students if there's anything for them or if they want to share, just to get that out of the way so they can get ready to learn. Like it has been said, what I love so much about the Ignite tutoring online is it's so specific for each child. I work in a dual language school, so I have 41 students overall. I see 21 at one time and then 20 at another time. And out of those 41 students, I have 25 who are on Ignite. And it would take me over 6 hours a day to be able to meet with each one independently from everybody else. The students are becoming so much more confident, and they try and they take risks. And we have data meetings. We had one today, and it's always so much fun to see the progress of where the kids have gone. And Ignite is really good at identifying the bright spots. So of course, when we have bright spots in our class, we come down and we share it with the kids, and they become confident. And my principal did this really cool road of walking, or a path of where they started and then where they ended. And last year I was able to bring my students to see, like, okay, we started here at the bottom and now almost all of us are at the top. So I was very wrong about thinking, oh gosh, another something that they're going to throw at us, because I'm so glad they threw it at us because it works. And they're invested, the tutors are invested in the kids. It's not just the tutors working, because of course we're doing things in the classroom, but it supports what we're doing in the classroom. And if a student isn't getting it as quickly as the others, they're able to revisit and go back and learn it to make sure they have that solid foundation. My students are engaged. They come in and they get right down to work. I pick them up from lunch a few minutes early every day, and they don't mind, and they're ready to go. And it's the one time of the day nobody has to go to the bathroom because we're on Ignite. And with 6-year-olds, that's a major feat. So yeah, when they log off, they're always like, I got 17 words or I got 30 words. So it's really amazing, and it supports my kids, and that's what I care about the most.
That's really great to hear, and I can just tell your passion. Just you exude it so beautifully. So I'm sure your kids are very lucky to have you, Carrie. I think I'm gonna pivot back, and Diane, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot one more time. have a question just as a district leader and someone who is, we came out of the pandemic and there was this moment of reckoning of how are we going to seize upon this moment to do things differently, to be more innovative. Looking forward, down the road in your district, how do you feel like high dosage tutoring fits into sort of this moment that we're meeting in history here?
It's interesting because I was just answering a question that came into the chat about from somebody I know professionally who knows that I have a background in mathematics and said, would an analogous program in math be helpful? And I do think that it would. I think that what is different about Ignite and in this particular program is there is still a real-time one-on-one live interaction between the student and the tutor. And I think that would be helpful for kids who are struggling with numeracy as much as it is for kids who are struggling with literacy. And that's where I see a difference. When we, even before the pandemic hit, we were exploring different online game-based tutoring models that we were purchasing and engaging kids in. Some of them were even free. And the difference was if a student was struggling but didn't know why, just getting it wrong and having a cartoon figure say, not quite, doesn't help them understand why they were wrong. Having a live person who can say, have you thought about it this way? Or can we try it this way? Not only builds the self-esteem, I think it was Katie who mentioned the self-esteem of these kids is in itself really important, because if they continue to struggle and see themselves as not being successful, then their own willingness to continue to try is going to ebb. And that's a problem. And that's what the difference between a game-based software program and a real live human being who can help you navigate those momentary lapses in self-confidence is really important. And then coming back from the pandemic, the gaps were just, so enormous. I don't think that even when we first came back from the pandemic, I know I'll speak for myself and say, I was not anticipating the level of recovery that we really needed from that year plus of closure. I feel like we are still trying to dig out from the ramifications of the pandemic. And I think that having a program like this, where it is live, individualized, every day, there's a relationship built between the student and the tutor. Stephanie had mentioned the data that we get back that informs the classroom teacher's practice too. All of this, I think, is hugely important. And I do think it's, no, we're never going to see a world where we don't need the classroom teacher there working with the kids. But if we can give students a little more one-on-one individualized targeted instruction, that's huge. And having it be a live human being, even if it's virtual, is a game changer.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great place to end it, right? Where we all are coming out of the pandemic, still trying to figure out what's best for kids. And a lot of times those conversations feel very doom and gloom and heavy. But here is one where we're seeing the impact give us hope and give us sort of that. I used to teach, so I still think I'm a teacher, but I'm not anymore. But it gives you that spark back, that joy to be in this profession. And so I just appreciate all four of you for joining us on the panel today. And I'm going to turn it back to Ed to introduce our closing speaker.
Mandy, thank you very much. And thank you so much to you and the panel for your work. I did see one final question in the chat that I think I can answer. That was the per pupil cost question. The cost is $2,500 per seat. We don't use the per pupil cost because it really is the cost for a seat over the course of the year. So to the extent that a student might graduate out either during the course of the year or there's some kind of other change, the best way to calculate it is $2,500 per seat. Of course, from our perspective as a public advocacy organization, we think that's a very small investment to make if indeed you're able to change the academic trajectory of students who might otherwise not succeed throughout the course of their K through 12 career and beyond. So we certainly are very much focused on that. Students do, once they achieve a certain level, are able to kind of graduate out of the program, and then funds can be used to transfer that to a seat for another student in need. So hopefully that will answer your question. I also want to point out to folks in the audience that you will get some material tomorrow. That material will include a recording of this session. It will include a report that MBAE has done that wraps some recommendations around this JHU research, and also will include a link to a video of a tutoring session, which is really amazing and will help answer a lot of maybe remaining questions that you might have. So look forward to that email tomorrow. We appreciate you being here. Before I introduce Commissioner Johnston, just as we are moving into the last phase of this conversation, we know that looking at data is important, analyzing and researching, but then using that to take action is really then the most important next step. And so we want to spend this last portion starting to have that conversation about what the next steps are. We know, and I'm certainly very grateful for the support that 1-8 Foundation has given to help launch this program here in Massachusetts. But we also know that proof of concept funding is not a forever thing, and that the role of philanthropy is to help seed and launch ideas, to provide that proof of concept, and then to hand it off to folks who can scale it up and work at the process of sustaining it. We also know in Massachusetts, we have a governor, and Governor Healy, who has launched literally a literacy launch initiative that is very much focused on bringing the science of reading curriculum to Massachusetts. And what you will see, unsurprisingly, in the recommendations that you get in the report tomorrow is an opportunity to try to couple that effort with an increasing number of students participating in high-dosage tutoring, in early literacy at the first grade. I want to, by way of introducing the commissioner, give him credit for the leadership that he has shown in his brief tenure thus far as Commissioner of Education. The Department of Education, in addition to the 1-8 Foundation funding over the last couple of years, has supplemented that with high-dosage tutoring in early literacy at second and third grade levels, and are still working to try to find and identify sources of either state or federal funding that can help supplement the commitment that has been made by 1-8. I also want to credit the commissioner because he has begun a conversation with the Board of Education about this particular model and how effective it might be, and what some initial goals might be that we should think about as a Commonwealth for expanding its use. And so it's with all of that context that with great pleasure and pride that I have an opportunity now to introduce Russell Johnston. Russell has shown a long career of experienced leadership here in education in Massachusetts, now serving as acting commissioner of the Commonwealth for elementary and secondary education. Without further ado, Commissioner Johnston, it's a pleasure for me to turn the program over to you to close us out.
Thank you, Ed. Just really want to express my gratitude for this excellent program today. Also, just extending my gratitude to the researchers from Johns Hopkins and the amazing panelists for this engaging discussion. I feel like I can just sort of bring up the caboose here because we've already learned and heard so much from the esteemed panelists you've already had the pleasure of hearing from today. And I think I just want to go back to the beginning of the presentation and the focus on research. And so we are very pleased to be taking in the research from Johns Hopkins. And we know that this can help us learn more about what we can do to even further improve outcomes for students. Really paying attention to this research base. So we ground our work in our education vision that really believes that we have to make sure that students from historically marginalized and underserved communities have equitable access, equitable opportunities to excel. And I think that word excel is so important, to excel in all content areas and across all grades. And so to get there, we believe that students need to be held to high expectations and with targeted supports to get there. And so you don't hear us talking about remediation, you hear us talking about acceleration. And that's that difference where we think holding students to high expectations, providing them with opportunities to excel at high levels, and with the supports that will get them there, we can accelerate learning and help to continue to improve outcomes. And we know that high dosage tutoring is a critical component of those targeted supports. So our board, I'm very grateful for the fact that the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education created a goal for me to continue to focus on addressing learning loss from the pandemic And so I really prioritize that goal that the board set for me every day in my leadership here at DESE. And so I think about, where we began today's discussion about that even before the pandemic, our ELA proficiency rates hovered at around 50%. We know that from MCAS. Third grade MCAS is looking at both reading and writing. So, this is parsing out the reading part of it, but we know there's a challenge, right? We know that it was a challenge before the pandemic. And now it's not such a matter of, do we even want students to catch up? Say we want to catch students up to where they were before the pandemic isn't the goal. We have to dramatically improve outcomes far beyond that. So we think about sort of the overarching strategies that we want to see in place to really see that kind of accelerated learning. And it really begins with equipping our teachers, right? Because it's been great to hear about the educator's role in this critical work. Obviously, no one is more important than the educator in improving these outcomes. So I want to make sure that we think about it's a system that has to come together to support our educators. And it begins with modern, high quality materials that embed excellent quality and representative texts that use evidence-based practices as the basis of the lessons that teachers are providing, and use culturally and linguistically relevant and sustaining approaches to their literacy experiences in our schools. So when we have that first layer of the curriculum, then we need to make sure that we have solid screening assessments, because we need to be able to identify which students need that extra support to be successful readers. And we know that children who need extra supports can be identified very early in kindergarten and even before kindergarten, and given the extra help that they need to get on track for long-term success. And then once we identify who those students are, we really need to make sure we have the right targeted supports for them. And we know that students need lots of extra practice on particular skills when it relates to reading and decoding in particular, to really build up that practice of becoming a fluent and excellent reader. And so that connection around an extra connection, right? Because we know we have skillful teachers in our classrooms, but like we just heard, we need that kind of extra layer at times of the skillful tutor who can provide that more customized, individualized supports very regularly. And this can be challenging to provide, so we need solid solutions. During our October board meeting, I made a proposal that relates to our budget request for next year, that I would like to see high dosage literacy tutoring for 13,000 first graders next year to be part of DESE's support for schools and districts. And so what we'd like to make sure that we have to make that happen is that those high quality tier 1 supports are in place for students, and that for students who need those additional supports, tutoring is a critical tool in the toolbox of supports. And so while we know we have more than 13,000 students who might need this type of, who need different types of supports, we know that tutoring can't be implemented everywhere, because we heard today about there are some things you need to have in place. You need to have a solid schedule that will allow for that 15 minutes of dedicated time each day. You need the technology. And so we think 13,000 students is ambitious and really adds, again, to that idea of a toolbox of strategies that can be used to support students. And having those right conditions in place means that we can get tutoring to the right students in an effective way as we move ahead into the next school year. And so we really want to make sure that one-to-one supports are in place, and that we think about as we add this as a strategy further to the toolbox, because like we've heard today, it's already here in Massachusetts. I just want our agency to support it further. We can get closer to the goal of making sure that all of our students are on the right track as early as possible, and certainly during first grade. So we think about, just the focus on these evidence-based practices, and we want to make sure that we're not really wasting any of our students' learning time on any approaches that aren't evidence-based, and we can see the evidence base around these tutoring strategies that we know can be so effective for our students. And on a really personal note, I had the opportunity to go to the Northeast Elementary School in Waltham this fall. They're a school, in addition to the ones you heard from today, that are implementing high dosage tutoring for early literacy across all of their first grade classrooms as part of their tiered systems of support. So they have that rich, high quality tier 1 support, and then on top of it, they have this ability to provide high dosage tutoring for the students who need it. And it was referenced earlier about the other programs that are available to support learning and to support literacy, and I'm not going to say that they're not effective, but there is something unique about this tutoring model. And particularly what really took my breath away when I was in the classrooms was that knowing that every student who needed tutoring was getting it. And to also see how many students needed it was just very eye-opening, because unlike, maybe where all students are taking some, different centers at times in classrooms, or, just rotating through some different stations, this is so purposeful. It's saying these are the students who absolutely need this additional one-on-one connection with an adult during the literacy block. And they're getting that repeated practice 5 times a week. We hear 15 minutes. You might think, how effective is that? It was so amazing to stand there and see how much ground was covered in 15 minutes. And to know that the next day when I'm not there, the students are going to get it again, and the next day, and the next day. And they're going to build those skills. And we're going to see those fireworks go off on the screen as each student makes that step-by-step growth that will take them far into their future. And so we are excited about our ability to hopefully promote more of our partners out there and vendors who are able to implement high dosage tutoring in literacy. And we are glad that it can continue to build on what we have been doing, that DESE is providing $1 million this year to have that literacy instruction, the high dosage tutoring in our first grade classrooms. And I do want to give a shout out to the 1-8 Foundation for all that they've done to really help us improve and refine our tutoring approach. And we look forward to how much that can carry us into the future. So we just know that each day matters for our students, and each day matters here at DESE, and we're going to continue to work with that sense of urgency to advance student learning. And I appreciate everyone's interest in this topic today.
Commissioner, thank you so much. Those were pitch perfect comments, very much appreciated. And I have to say that ambition in pursuit of successful outcomes is certainly worthy of support. And so we stand ready to support you in the effort to expand this model to students in need. Thank you so much for your comments today and for your participation with us. Again, in closing, I want to thank the researchers from Johns Hopkins University. I want to thank Mandy McLaren and our panel. I want to thank all of you for attending. I want to remind you that you'll be getting some follow-up material, both a recording of this session, which I hope you would share with your networks, as well as our report with recommendations included, and a link to tutoring session video. Please join us in becoming advocates for this program. It works. We ask you to be engaged, and we ask you to help us educate others about a model that we think will advance student success for many years to come. Thank you all for joining us. Hope you have a great day.